Before I get started, I do consulting on where you can move. I'll work with you to find the perfect place for you to move to. There's more information at the end of the video about that. Now let's get started. For all the grief I give the state of Vermont, it's actually a really nice place to live. It's full of charming small towns and pretty good schools. It's really safe in most places, and it's not crowded with traffic and homelessness and a-holes you find in many pockets throughout this country. Vermont has some pretty friendly people, although I can say I don't agree with the know-it-all liberalism that permeates throughout this place. It's rare to meet somebody in Vermont who will ever admit they're wrong about their political viewpoints. Despite the charm and the safety and the beauty, Vermont has problems just like anywhere else. Drugs are a big headache here, and more people struggle than you might expect. There aren't a lot of good paying jobs up here, and because the cost of living is super high, people have trouble getting ahead. There's trailer parks all over the place because it's so expensive. And trailer parks in the cold weather are no fun, let me tell you that. I spent a week in Vermont in early March of 2022. The goal was to explore all over, talk with people, and show you guys some perspective on how Vermonters live. Now, if you run data and talk to people in Vermont about the worst places to live here, a few cities and towns will come up. One is St. Albans, another's Barrie, some say Rutland, and others say Brattleboro. I chose Brattleboro to make my point. They're kinda all almost the same. In this video, we're gonna drive through Brattleboro, a city of about 12,000 people. We're gonna see what one of the worst places in Vermont looks like, and later, we're gonna visit one of the best places in Vermont too, the small town of Woodstock. I think once you see what the worst places to live in Vermont look like, you're gonna be like, that would be a good place in my state, and the point will be made, people. So here we go. The good and bad sides of Vermont. We're off to visit some small towns in Vermont. The good and the bad places are better than you thought. Yeah. The town of Brattleboro. This little place of 12,000 people is located way down near the Massachusetts-New Hampshire border in Windham County. There's enough to do for a family here, although it's very much a small town life. The type of place where you see people you know at the hardware or grocery store or at church. A home here is about $290,000 on average. That's far below the U.S. average of $350,000, but still higher than you might have expected. It's mostly clean, and it looks far better than other struggling places I've visited. I think you'd agree just by looking at the place. It's a very white community. 92% of the population here is some shade of Caucasian, but that's how it is across all of Vermont. So what's the problem here? Well, poverty and drugs mostly, although when you hear the numbers, you'll get some perspective. 11% of the population here lives in poverty, and the average income for a family is about $45,000. Those numbers are only slightly worse than the state average. There aren't a lot of really good jobs here, but again, it's like that in most of Vermont outside of the state capital of Burlington. The dairy and farming industries are in decline in this part of the state, so that doesn't help. Plus, it's just a small town, isolated by large swaths of woods. What big companies are going to move here, huh? Because of a lack of good-paying careers, a lot of people either leave the state entirely or they struggle. If you didn't know, Vermont's one of 10 states to see a population loss over the last decade. Or for those who stick it out, it's hard to get ahead. Some people work more than one job, others live in mobile home parks, so they rent. Brattleboro has the largest mobile home park in the whole state of Vermont. Drugs are also a big problem in Vermont, as they are in many parts of the Northeast. Opioids like heroin and fentanyl have taken hold in small towns like this in a big way, fella. But while Vermont as a whole seems to have turned the tide, Brattleboro is getting worse. In fact, this little town set a new record for drug overdoses recently. And with that comes a huge spike in crime. Brattleboro saw drug-related car break-ins increase by 400% in the last year alone. That's a lot. Why is the drug problem bad here? Well, these drugs make their way into smaller communities like this, and they're sold at a much higher price than they would fetch in places like Boston, New York City, and Springfield. And it's just easier to deal and consume drugs in smaller communities where there's less police around. There's just not a lot to do here, and the ambition level for many youths is low. But I know, a lot of you are like, this is bad? This place looks great compared to the ghetto hoods where I live. I could live there. It's all about perspective, people. Vermont's worst place is actually not that bad, comparatively.
I agree. It's not that bad here, Nick. Quit making fun of it. That's all you do on your YouTube channel. Your channel sucks.
Mappy, that's mean. You make me cry. Psych. Soon, we're going to visit one of the best places to live in Vermont for additional perspective. But first, I wanted to run a conversation with a Vermont resident who knows about small towns like Brattleboro. We talked about the struggles of small towns like this and what makes Vermont, Vermont. Okay, so I'm showing Brattleboro right now. I tried to find the worst pocket in one of the worst places to live. It's actually not that bad. If there are going to be challenges in a place like Brattleboro or Rutland, which are sort of equally bad looking, but not bad, what would those challenges be in a place like that?
Well, the challenge in Brattleboro, things are, unfortunately changing a little bit for not the best. And Rutland's been about the same. It's going to be finding work, but mostly finding housing, right? Because the thing about Vermont is that you can find a plethora of entry-level jobs. Like turn your head, you can find a job. You can find 2 jobs. And many people do. But finding a job and affording housing, even in those areas, especially Brattleboro, which is more expensive, is going to be your main hurdle. It's not like California yet, but it's getting really hard.
So poor paying jobs and above average housing costs in places like Brattleboro.
Yeah, poor paying mass jobs, right? There are exceptionally few good jobs in this state, and you really got to pigeonhole yourself into a select couple of industries, or else you're not really going to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. So the problem is just average house price, poor paying jobs, unless you're one of the few that has a good career going.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's why it's challenging there, because a lot of people are renting and are broke for Vermont standards in Brattleboro.
Yeah. I mean, again, by national standards, it's not so bad, and we have a incredibly low unemployment rate. But the true fact of the matter is that many people are working multiple jobs to get by. Even myself, I'm a professional with a bachelor's degree, working in a specialized field, and I moonlight as a delivery driver.
So is that why a lot of people? Yeah, is that why a lot of people are leaving Vermont then? Because you wrote to me and said that you were thinking about, moving, and you were kind of weighing your options. And I hear that a lot of, especially younger people, younger than you, when they graduate, they get out of Vermont because not only are they bored, because kids these days don't like to, explore nature and be outside, but jobs. They just feel like they just need to. Is that pretty much a big reason so many people are leaving?
Yeah, high-paying jobs. One who's professional class, Vermont again is absolutely brilliant to just do an entry-level job, and maybe you're like you buy a trailer or something, and you'll do fine. But still, some people gotta work 2 jobs to even get that far.
You mean a trailer, like a mobile home?
Like a mobile home in a park, yeah, if you can even find one.
So people are buying mobile homes in Vermont and living in them because they can't afford a house?
Yeah, that happens quite a lot, actually. I mean, even a mobile home in a park, you're going to pay, 80 to, I've seen as high as, over $100,000 for in-park single.
And you probably have like high school teachers living in there because they can't afford a house.
Yeah, I mean, a high school teacher, maybe, but a lot of other people, they're not gonna be able to handle living in a home or buying a home on their own, or even with a partner.
Yeah, do you have a lot of other people in your circle that are getting out of Vermont, like you guys are thinking about doing?
Well, I have a lot of people that are really sticking it out, because while I'm more of a pragmatic, practical centrist, a lot of my friends are further left, so they are digging in their heels, staying.
What about I hear drugs are becoming really bad for small towns in the Northeast. in places like Brattleboro, and Rutland and Barrie, and New Hampshire's got a huge problem. Maine,
Hmm.
Massachusetts. I mean, go on and on. Is that something it's becoming really noticeable and talked about in Vermont?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. I mean, Burlington's going to have it, but that's Burlington's a city, one of the only normal city in the state. So yeah, but I've seen it firsthand in Barrie, and it's kind of depressing. And then you see it in rural communities. It's not like you can just go there and see it, but you hear stories of families going through absolute hell. One of my um, close friends have had parts of his family go through absolute hell. We had a house burned down because of, lack of care, fights happening. It's the drug problems in this area of the country are they're really serious, but they're also, you have to dig a little bit under the surface to see them.
Is it just because people are bored? Like, how do drugs make their way into a town with 2,700 people in rural Vermont?
Well, usually it's going to happen at like a party, right? You'll have these rural country parties, and then somebody be like, "Hey, try this," and then they'll go down a rabbit hole and off
Mhm.
into addiction land. And that's, of
Mhm.
course, not the case with every type of drug, but the problematic ones we see, like heroin and whatnot. Also, yeah, maybe with the only other thing I could see was maybe be like the weather, that people get depressed and they go on and they get probably diagnosed some medicine improperly, and then they get hooked on it, and that's another way in. Those are the two main culprits.
Yeah. So would it be fair to assume that the main challenges that your state faces are affordability and jobs, or it's going to continue to lose population?
Yes, yeah. The main problem is absolutely affordability and jobs. And we need people. We need people in companies. People are leaving. People in Vermont love this like small, like independent business, little tiny business thing, and it's really important for our image. But we're not going to have the money. We're not going to have the white collar jobs, the professional jobs, even some of the good paying blue collar jobs that we need, if we don't have more business coming in.
Yeah, like small businesses, mom and pops, that kind of stuff. You need people to staff those, and all the younger kids that are graduating high school or getting out of there, and it's
Hmm.
just tough to keep these places open.
Yeah, yeah, more or less. We just need more white collar jobs. I mean, it's when you have like three employers and then the state of Vermont, it's not enough variety.
No, no. If you're
No,
watching right now, Vermont's a beautiful state. I'm trying, Alec. I'm really trying to get people to consider. That's why I'm showing that. I mean, the whole point of this was to be like, this is considered a bad place in Vermont, and it's really not that bad. So,
yeah,
I people ask me where to move. I do like it in the Northeast. Um, Again, the politics are going to deter some people, but it's so beautiful up there, and it's so laid back.
yeah. I mean, I gotta say, the politics, there's their benefits, right? Like, if you say you're a family, this is one thing. If you can take your job with you, right? If you have a good like remote job or something like that, and you can take it with you, and you can move into one of the less expensive areas that isn't criminal. Like, there's a big difference between Barrie City and Barrie Town. Barrie Town is probably one of the best places to live if you don't really care about being occupied by the cool stuff in Chittenden County. It's just a place to live. Wonderful, wonderful schools. I work in those schools often. I know. And there's a lot of assistance available for families, and the education quality is the best part of the state. Like, even better than the mountains. Like, education's excellent here.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if that's your thing, I think you should come here.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of people, it's tough.
Why do these places get a bad rap? I mean, is it just people in Vermont picking on the poor people? Is that what it
Yeah,
is?
yeah. You see memes all over the place. It's just, because a place looks worse than another place doesn't mean it's bad compared to, I don't know, south side of Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah.
Good point, Alec. Okay, so I spent a lot of time in other parts of Vermont, and I wanted to show you what a nice place here looks like. Not that Brattleboro is terrible or anything, but just an hour north of Brattleboro is the community of Woodstock, which has just under 3,000 people. According to data and word of mouth, this place is considered one of the best places to live in this state. So what is it about Woodstock that makes it great? Well, compared to a place like Brattleboro, here you're going to find higher incomes, less crime, nicer homes, and less drugs. That's pretty much it. While homes in Brattleboro are around $290,000, up here it's almost double that. A lot of the homes close to downtown are more than $1 million each. You'd have to drive way out into the rural edges of town to find something under $500,000. Woodstock was called the prettiest small town in America by Ladies' Home Journal magazine, whatever that is. But I believe it. I walked around. Everybody was friendly. The shops were all quaint. It's probably more of a tourist trap than a realistic place for you to bring your family. But if you had some cash and you could work from home, it's feasible. For all of you looking for an option where crime is basically zero and you can ship your kids off to great schools and be part of a community, this is what that would look like. There isn't a lot to do outside of outdoorsy stuff, and it's really cold for half the year. And again, you have high taxes and liberal policies, so there's that too. Plus they issue parking tickets here for this little small place? Really? Small town Vermont? By the end of my week in Vermont, I was sick of the cold. One day it was 0 degrees. The local weather girl, who dresses very interestingly, was quick to point out how cold it was the week I was there. As you can imagine, after a week in Vermont, my car looked like I lived there. Actually, I don't have a Subaru, so I really didn't look like I lived there. Get this, they have Subaru-specific parking spaces at some joints in town. That's very elitist and segregationist, if you ask me. I spent some time in Killington and killed it on a powder day. That was fun. The locals said there weren't very many powder days this year, and a lot of people complained about all the out-of-staters like me taking over town. The locals were also pretty rude on the slopes, too. Imagine that. I walked a segment of the Appalachian Trail when I was there. The snow was deep, but I was able to trek on for about a quarter mile, which is 1/8,000th of its entire length. They say this trail can change your life. Certainly, I can say something spoke to me on the trail that day. I'll never be the same. Consider my life changed. Rumor is there was once a centaur sighting along this length of trail. I did not have a centaur sighting, sadly. I ate at a place called Casey's, which has a real-life caboose as a booth. You have to actually climb up into your seat for dinner. That was scary, because after dinner, I had a double vanilla vodka root beer float. But look out for me coming down this ladder after dinner. I sat by many fireplaces and cabins here. That's totally a Vermont thing to do, right? So is shooting a buck. I did that on my trip as well. This picture is proof of that. You know what they say, Vermont, lots of good views and lots of good brews. Or at least that's what I say. Here's some locals gassing up their sleds. There aren't too many other places in the country where people take their snowmobiles to the corner market. But people in Vermont live a different life. It's like no other place in the country. And you're constantly reminded of that everywhere you go. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about where you live now? Because most places, that would be a good place in a lot of states. So
yeah. Well, I mean, right now I live in Milton, which is in Chittenden County. Not quite part of the Burlington Metro, but just like outside of it. And it's really boring. Like there's really nothing going on. It's right on the cusp of true country and like suburbia. By most of the country standards, it's country. It's just there's very little like hardcore development up here. Everything's quite rural. That's some people's bag. It's other people's not bag. I've traveled across the South and the Eastern Seaboard. I've seen most of what there is to see until you get really into Upper Appalachia, and it's rural, right?
Yeah, well, that's good though. I mean, rural. There's nothing wrong with rural.
Yeah, but yeah, there's just not much going on. You got to go to Burlington to get any sort of shopping done, and that's whether you live close to Burlington and can go to the the like 3 shopping centers, or if you live an hour away, it doesn't matter. You got to go. So I think I read somewhere the average commute time is almost an hour.
Oh, for in Vermont to go to work and stuff.
Yeah. I myself drive 100 miles round trip every day.
Yeah. Oh. So, like, what would those industries be? Like medicine, healthcare, tech? Is that it?
Yeah. So it's going to be any medical anything. I mean, there's plenty of jobs. In fact, we have a dire need for nursing. Absolutely dire. Please come be a nurse in Vermont. We need you badly. But education is actually a pretty good thing to be. And I work in a tangential field related to education, special ed closer than normal education. But and if you can find your niche, there's a little bit of a banking sector in Burlington. And the rural areas are known for being excellent if you are into forestry and do your own business.
What values would those be that people are digging in their heels in Vermont for?
Well, there's 2 main things. One's political. So if you're a left-leaning person, it's a really great place to be. And it's one of the places where you can go out in the sticks and you'll find people that share your opinions in that regard. It does not represent the typical U.S. rural cities and conservative rural. That doesn't apply here. So that's one thing. And the other thing is it's still gorgeous. Like it's in the summer, it's amazing. And if you like the outdoors, it's heaven on earth if you can stand the cold.
Yeah. So like even in the rural areas in Vermont, everyone's pretty much progressive. It's not like you go out to the rural areas out in the rest of the country and it gets pretty conservative. Like out there, it's pretty much liberal land.
There's some places in the Northeast Kingdom that are holdouts, really. And then the only place with real population that's getting more conservative in the state is actually Franklin County, by the border of New York and Canada. That place is the only well-populated kind of like centrist area, but still, the entire state, except for the far corners of the Northeast Kingdom, is predominantly Democrat.
What are the values that Vermonters hold dear to their heart that are liberal values that might not be values that other progressive folks might have in other states?
Progressive values that people don't have in other states.
I mean, is there a unique way, like a flavor of liberalism in Vermont that's different than other states?
Traditionally, yes. In the modern America, we've seen a lot more polarization between people, unfortunately. But Vermont has certain parts of it have really fought that, especially the old school Vermonters, the people in old school Vermont. I mean, everybody's just got to get along. You have these little tiny towns and people really involved in each other's lives. And we come in town meeting day and we argue, and then we go have lunch after together and smile and chat about, grandma, whatever's garden. It's this very like, yeah, sure, we have our differences, but everybody comes together. And there's another thing that Vermonters, no matter what their political stripe, also love their guns, which I think a lot of people don't realize outside the state.
Yeah, liberals with guns. You don't see that very often.
There's a lot of them, and frankly, there's a lot of us here. There's a strong liberal gun culture here, and to a limited extent, New Hampshire as well, but really up here.
Yeah. Well, you need people. How would the state of Vermont feel if 6,000 conservatives came roaring in and said we're going to live here? Would that not be the kind of people that y'all would want up there?
Tell you what, go to Franklin County and you'll be fine.
Yeah. That's probably, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, go to Franklin County. I think you'll be around like-minded people. The schools aren't quite as good there, but I think you got a good balance of housing affordability, and you can really commute to Burlington. And this is also one of the only places in the state where some of the good blue-collar jobs are too. We're talking about Husky. We're talking about the St. Albans Industrial Park, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of finding, I think people's entertainment options, people tend to get so bored these days, but with streaming and being at home, I think people are more happy with space and safety and affordability than anything else. And it's the affordability part's the only thing that's probably a deterrent. The taxes are high.
One more thing about the taxes. So state income tax really isn't so bad. It's the housing tax. It's homeowners tax.
The property tax.
Property tax is one of the highest in the country, both proportionally and practically. And that's because education is in a really good state here, but it has to come out of the property tax, not the state income tax. So we were going to buy a little tiny house in Fairfax, which is in Franklin County. There you go. And the property tax on this $200,000 home was going to be $4,300 a month.
A year, you mean?
A year. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a problem.
You've made a good case for, and you've answered some questions that I had. And, again, together, I think we've put into perspective what it's like to live in a below average place in Vermont, but what it's like to live and compared to other states, it's actually not that bad at all. So that was I would say if you want to get out and go to the Northeast, New Hampshire probably is cheaper and less. I would say it's probably more neutral politically, but the schools aren't as good. But they're both great places to live.
Yeah, I would say and also with Northern Vermont, if you have your passport, you can go to Montreal if you want just to get something different. It's really quite close. I think if I'm going to say one thing about the bad places in Vermont, St. Albans, I will dig my heels in and say it is not as bad as people say. Please give St. Albans a chance. If you're going to choose someplace in the northeast of the state, that is the place to be. If you can afford Essex, good for you. If you can't, St. Albans. And Barrie gets a bad rap, but it's also not so bad. Rutland is the one to stay away from.
Are you looking to move and need advice? I do consulting. That's right. I'll sit down and talk about where the next perfect place for you and your family should be. I do it all the time. Together, let's find you a new home that's safe and checks all your boxes. You can get my email in the description to find out how I can help you find your perfect relocation. And I can also help you find your new house too. Email me and I'll work with you on not just helping you figure out where to move, but I can help you find your perfect home too. That's right. I know awesome, reliable agents all over the country, and I'd love to connect you to somebody who can help you search for that perfect home. Hey everyone. So it's pretty clear by now that elected leaders aren't going to help you. If you don't like what you saw in this video, demanding change won't work. You're going to have to do it on your own. If you want to be safe and want your community to be a place where people want to live, you're going to have to clean the place up yourselves. You're going to have to work with your friends and neighbors to lower crime. Politicians clearly don't care as much anymore. It's up to us.
This is Sage, Nick's manager. This has been a Corner House Entertainment production.